This program is made possible in part by the Moving Image Trust Fund.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Soldier diplomat, entrepreneur, author, commentator, General Wesley Clark is our guest for the next half hour. General, thanks for making this time available to us.
It's good to be with you, Steve.
You're published widely in professional journals, but you have three, I believe now, books to your credit.
Well, this is actually the fourth.
Well, yeah. Right, since you left active duty. We're here with Don't Wait for the Next War, your latest contribution to the literature of strategic affairs. One can't help but notice that on the book, on the cover of the book, the next war are the dominant three words, and don't wait for are somewhat smaller. There is the assumption underlying, I suppose, every statesman, every diplomat, certainly every soldier's consciousness that the next one is inevitable.
Seems like it's inevitable, but the truth about the title is that the title refers to the fact that the United States never has a strategy unless it's threatened or goes to war. You know, we're a nation that believes in the distribution of power. So Article 10 of the Bill of Rights, you know, everything not granted to the federal government is reserved for the states. So it's what happens at local level, state level, everything from voting to the economy. We believe in a free enterprise economy. Now, yes, there's market regulation, but there's no one in Washington that can snap their fingers and say, give me 10,000 jobs next week in California or something like this. There's no overall control in this country except in the area of foreign affairs. And so when it comes to pulling Americans together, we pull together when we're threatened or when we have to take action. And the problem we have right now is the threats are out there and we need to pull together, and we haven't.
Well, in terms of national strategy, you would broaden that definition, and you're not alone in this, but you particularly have been outspoken in this regard. You would broaden the whole definition of national strategy and national security beyond just the Pentagon and Langley.
Yes, Eisenhower did this. You know, Eisenhower was our great strategist. He had such a good strategy that he fooled most of the people into thinking he had none. Because if you have a good strategy, it fits, it's comfortable, it's normal. And what Ike said in his speech when he was first inaugurated to be president, he said, we've seen the face of evil, and he was talking about communism and China and Stalin in Eastern Europe and the Korean War. And he said, Democrats and Republicans don't always agree, but we've got to pull together to protect the country and protect freedom and liberty from the evil abroad. That was the strategy that basically kept America together during the Cold War. And every succeeding president used a variation of that strategy. Of course, when the Cold War ended and communism sort of fell apart, then we didn't have a strategy to keep Democrats and Republicans together. It's not that Democrats and Republicans agreed on everything during the Cold War, but they agreed on enough. And Ike viewed national strategy as not just what you do with foreign policy, but it was about strengthening the American economy. Right. We wanted to be sure the military budget didn't bankrupt America. And he believed that you had to have a strong economy first. That's where our real strength lies, not in the armed forces. So those are all the ingredients of national strategy that I'm referring to.
Yeah, and President Eisenhower, in building an interstate highway system, I mean, he emphasized that this will help us get troops and tanks across the country pretty fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which it did, but or would have, but he downplayed the commercial aspects of it. But that to him was as integral to national security as spy satellites.
Yes, because for him, actually the interstate highway system had been proposed 15 years before, but no one had ever mustered the political will to pull it together. So Ike said it was a defense and interstate highway system. He said, defense? We need to protect this country? Okay, we're going to invest in roads. And that's what we did. And that's the way America has worked. And now we're facing challenges from terrorism, cyber threats, from still a volatile financial system. You can just see now China's devalued and Wall Street's shaky about this. And then the growth of Chinese power and climate change or global warming, whatever you want to call it. These are big, long-term challenges. And if you roll them together, they're just the same kind of existential threat to America that the challenge of communism was in Ike's era.
Existential.
Existential.
You mentioned for just now global warming or climate change, which is a politically divisive issue in the United States. Yet you're not alone. The National Security Council, the Joint Chiefs, for years have been warning that this has some very severe. Ms. Lagarde of the IMF, I think, keeps her up every night. Global warming, and yet we run into what could either be scientific or ideological resistance to the problem. What has happened? What has happened to that Vandenbergian spirit that prevailed during Eisenhower's time?
Well, I think it has to be pulled together under the rubric of national security for Americans to see the importance of it. Now, take climate change, for example. The modest predictions of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the UN group, they say that there might be a 3.5 foot rise in sea level in the next 85 years. But if you actually look at the data, there's a 97% chance that it won't rise more than 10 feet. But what if it does rise 8 feet? There's 2 billion people that live in that part of the earth that's near the ocean that could be thrown out of their homes in storm surges and other things with an 8-foot climate rise. So you're talking about massive dislocation. I was in Washington a couple of years ago, and I had dinner with a congresswoman. I said, "What are you working on now?" She says, "Oh, I'm working on flood insurance and how we're going to subsidize flood insurance. You know, after Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, now we can't, you know, the federal government subsidizes this for people to live next to the ocean and everything, and the question is, how much subsidy do we put in there?" Most Americans don't know that. So when you start having these massive dislocations, a Katrina or Hurricane Sandy not every 5 years, but every 2 or 3 years, and the cost is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, it starts to have a real impact. And that's just America. You know, a typhoon in the Philippines or in Bangladesh kills hundreds of people and does billions of dollars worth of damage and can completely destroy these economies. Or drought in Africa and the Middle East. Most of us understand that the conflict in Syria was driven in part by unusual drought conditions that forced 600,000 farmers off their land and into the cities. They were fighting mad. No one knew quite what they were mad at, but since Bashar al-Assad was in charge, they turned out to be mad at him. But it was drought that did that.
Yeah. If we have always had a kind of contentious national security policy, or debate anyway, at least until maybe a generation ago, it did sort of stop at the water's edge. At the end of the day, there was a kind of consensus, and it more or less yielded to the executive. And that seems to have changed. I mean,
It
or
has
hasn't?
changed.
How egregious is the problem? Why did this come about?
Well, I think the 24-hour news cycle. I think the greater ease of communications. I think social media. I think the fact that anyone can express an opinion. I think the news as entertainment. All these things have encouraged people to be more outspoken about their ideas. And in the old days, I don't think if you were a U.S. Senator, you'd go abroad and criticize your president. But people do it today all the time. There's a much stronger political linkage, too, that we didn't have in the past between U.S. political parties and counterparts abroad. The Conservative Party, Republican Party in the United States, the British Labour Party, and the Democratic Party, exchanging ideas and staffers, and here's the way you win this election, and here's the way you communicate. And now in social networking, there are experts in how to find the micro leaders on Facebook and Twitter, and how to then influence them to influence everybody else. I was in Romania and met with a group that claimed they'd swung 6 million votes in the Romanian presidential election. That group's available for hire, and they would like to work in many other elections in many other countries. So all of these things, they undercut the traditional notions of politics stopping at the water's edge.
And what's the antidote? Is there one?
Well, I think the antidote's education. But the trouble is that education and politics are like, it's a little like a fire and water, because politics is passion. It's from the heart. Education's from the mind. And so you look at the same facts differently. I mean, we've done research on people and how they process information, and you can wire up their brains and say, okay, here's a story about a political candidate that you support, and the facts come in, and the story's good, and there's a nice calming feeling. Now here's the contrary facts, and it's not processed on the left side of the brain for ration. It's processed on the right side of the brain, goes right to the heart and the gut, and it makes you angry. And so people have a tendency they watch the news media that they agree with. They want to see things that reinforce them. And that's where American politics is today.
The next war. The majority of Americans seem desperately to want out of the ones that we are presently in which we're presently engaged, if they are wars or actions or whatever the extent there is. I detect anyway, and I suspect you do too, a great weariness on the part of them. They want the boys home. What's the way out? Is there a way out? Or do we just resign ourselves? Do we kind of sober up and say, no, we cannot withdraw, or we need to change our mission? What? And with specific regard to the Middle East.
Yeah, well, politicians, they always tell you, don't argue about the past, let's talk about the future. But the truth is, you can't get out unless you understand why you got in. The war in Iraq was a mistake. It was driven by a group in the Republican Party of neocons. They didn't start out that way. They started out as hawks. They believed after the Gulf War of 1991 that we should have smashed our way up to Baghdad. No matter what the UN resolution said or whatever, they did this because they saw advantage in it in their positions in the United States. It was driven by domestic U.S. politics. And those same people came into office, or put in office under President George W. Bush, and they persuaded him that after 9/11, the appropriate response wasn't really to go get Osama bin Laden and finish him off. It was really to go get Saddam Hussein. And so we pulled resources away from Afghanistan immediately after the bombing over there in 2001, 2002. We started our planning going for the invasion of Iraq, and we refused to plan for the end game there, because the papers circulating through the Pentagon said, well, this might not be the end game. After we've gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, we could take out some of these other people in the region that we don't like. And this was the sort of informal thinking. Let's see how it goes. Let's keep going. If you'd ever really sat down and done your full military planning, like we did in the 1990s for Bosnia, Kosovo, and Haiti, you would have realized that the invasion of Iraq was a loser from the beginning. It's exactly why President George H. Bush said, do not invade Iraq. Because once you go in there and take Saddam out, the seams are going to split apart, and you've got this Sunni-Shia conflict, and you can't control it. Brent Scowcroft knew that in 1990-91, but we had to learn it the hard way. So what we need to do to get out is we can't fight these battles. They're not our fight. So what we have to do is reinforce our allies. We have to stay on the outside of them. We can provide training. We can provide air support. And we have to make sure our economy is less and less and less dependent on these conflict-torn regions, because we can't solve the passions that drive men and women to kill each other in the Middle East.
What is the, other than, well, you talk about arming our allies or assisting our allies, and so in terms of energy independence, we're moving more and more in that direction, I would say, certainly in terms of fossil fuels and with R&D into other forms of energy technology all the time. What's got to be America? Are we in any position to greatly, within the near term, reduce our profile, our footprint in the Middle East?
Well, it's a matter of choice. But this is what the president's trying to do, is reduce our profile. But there's multiple agendas at work. You know, ISIS was formed by our allies. They, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all allies of the United States. They wanted Sunni extremists to fight against Iranian Shia extremists. They put the money, they put the training, they put the weapons in, and they created a Frankenstein. And so that's what we're all dealing with right now. So there's multiple agendas. For the Saudis, they'd like U.S. ground troops, I'm sure, to crush ISIS, because I'm not sure that they're comfortable with their own forces, who are basically taught Sharia law, the same Sharia law about beheading that ISIS says that that's their law too. I'm not sure they're comfortable with the ground forces in a face-to-face conflict. And then there's Turkey, who would like our support because they would like to recreate the Ottoman Empire if people would accept it, and they don't want to be surrounded by Iran. And there's Qatar, which likes keeping our U.S. air base there because their oil gas fields are right on the boundary in the Persian Gulf with the Iranian gas and oil fields, and so they feel a little intimidated. They've got 900,000 people, and Iran has 75 million. So these nations are all pulling at us for various reasons. What we have to do is look at our own interest. So move to energy independence as rapidly as possible. That's the best way to de-weight the area.
What are the absent energy, is there really much justification for a large Western effort to remake the Middle East? I mean, the Middle East is basically it's a Western construct now, at least going back to the fall of the Ottomans anyway, and the end of World War I. Yeah, it was these country lines were pretty much drawn by Britain and France, I guess.
Well, I think you have to go back and learn from history here. So at the end of World War II, the United States had supported Chiang Kai-shek. We didn't believe in communism and Mao Zedong. And Chiang Kai-shek was our man. And yes, you know, people said he was corrupt, and they said this was wrong with him and that was wrong with him, and his soldiers didn't fight very well. But I mean, we put training missions in there. We gave him military assistance. We helped him fight in World War II. And at the end of World War II, we hoped he would, but he didn't. And the communists took over China. We evacuated, and there was a big political brouhaha here in this country in the late 1940s and early 1950s about who lost China. Which party was it, and why did they lose China? Well, it was never ours to lose, and neither is the Middle East. There are hundreds of millions of people. They speak Farsi or Arabic. They practice a different form of religion. They have their own culture. And really, until 300 or 400 years ago, their culture, their economies, they were superior to those of Western Europe. During the dark ages of Western Europe, the Middle East had universities in art and architecture and astronomy and poetry and painting and learning. And in Western Europe, we were struggling with the Black Plague and ignorance and poverty. They didn't go north of the Pyrenees because there wasn't enough north of the Pyrenees to draw them there. Yeah. So we have to recognize the forces of history. It's not our region. We're concerned about Israel. And Israel is a wonderful country. It's a wonderful dream. And my father was Jewish, and I've got strong feelings for Israel. But the rest of the region, we can't do much about that. So we're in some very difficult relationships, Steve.
In your assessment now, is Israel going to have to leave the West Bank? If Israel were to leave the West Bank, somehow, some way, the Netanyahu government doesn't seem at all inclined to do that, and to work toward a two-state. How far would that go toward lessening the tension in that region?
Well, I think that we have to continue to work
not the only factor.
It's not resolution with the Palestinians, because I don't think that it's right to have the state of war that exists currently. It's not an American concept. We don't believe in oppression. We don't believe in police states and so forth. And in order to maintain their own security in Israel, they're pretty darn tough on the West Bank and the Palestinians out there. And so we'd like to see a peace agreement, but I think it's naive to believe that a peace agreement would end the conflict in the region. I think the presence of Israel and the unresolved situation with the Palestinians is but one factor driving conflict in that region. And the flood of petrodollars exacerbates that conflict. And the flood of weaponry, which we're contributing to, that makes it even more volatile. Of course, as soon as the Iran agreement is signed and approved, everybody but us is going to be selling the Iranians more weapons too. That's what they want. And Russia's already been in there talking about shipping them the newest air defense capacity, which of course means that U.S. and Israeli capacities to execute the military option are diminished against Iran. So there are a lot of changes coming here that are not necessarily welcome, but our best approach to this is to back away. It's not our region. And what we showed in Iraq with the great service and sacrifice of our own men and women, including a lot from here in Arkansas, we showed that we are the best fighting force in the world, but you can't build someone else's country for them when they don't want it built.
Well, it brings us to the treaty, or to the agreement anyway, between Washington, between the State Department, between the administration and Iran. Your view?
Well, I think the agreement should be signed and approved. It's not a perfect agreement. Everybody wishes it were better. You know, we wish that we could have persuaded the Iranians to say, okay, we'll never have nuclear weapons, fine, here, take all this stuff, get it out of here, like Libya did. But they looked at what happened to Gaddafi after he did that, and they said, we ain't ever going that way. Mm-hmm. So they're not giving that up. We wish that they would destroy those centrifuges. They're not going to. And we wish we had the right to keep a helicopter team of inspectors hovering over Iran, and at any moment they could, pow, pop down and say, open that closet. What's in that closet? But the Iranians, they didn't agree to that. And we wish that we could have our allies poised on the brink of this and say to the Iranians, you make one mistake, those sanctions are going back on. But the truth is that sanctions always hurt both sides. And our allies and our negotiating partners like Russia and China, they're eager to get in and do business in Iran. There are businessmen from France already in there preparing to cut deals. Now, supposedly the deal hasn't been quite cut yet. But we're getting the reports that they're in there. So saying no to the treaty, you're not going to get a better treaty out of it. You might get a conflict if you want, but we've already looked at that option. It's not really the right option for the United States of America. And there are some problems with the treaty and getting it followed up on and enforced and so forth. But we are where we are. And I believe that treaty should be signed despite the fact that it doesn't do everything that a lot of Americans wanted it to do.
Got to end it there, General, because we're simply out of time. We thank you for yours.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This program is made possible in part by the Moving Image Trust Fund.